Mayor Kincannon.
Ben,
Nice to meet you.
nice to meet you too.
Thanks a lot for doing this. I've been looking forward to it for a long time.
I know, me too.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I think about when I think about public servants living in this climate that we're in right now is it's got to be, it's got to be a tougher time to serve with people seemingly being as politically charged and divided as they've ever been. Do you find that it's a harder time to serve than, let's say, if you were the mayor 10 years ago?
I think it is a time of intensity and polarization. So in that sense, absolutely. Plus, with the advent of social media and trolling, some people can be pretty toxic when it's not face to face. But that helps us rise to the challenge, and that kind of intensity, just makes me want to work harder and do better and represent the vast majority of the people who just want good things to happen for Knoxville, which is what I want too.
Well, you're the mayor of my favorite city in the world.
Yeah, wonderful. Are you from here?
I am. I grew up here. Was born at Fort Sanders Hospital.
Okay.
Went to Bearden High School.
All right.
Lived in LA for a couple of years and then moved back.
That's the kind of story I like to hear. People go explore the world, grow up here, explore the world, and then come back and find their way and share their talents here with Knoxville. So I'm glad you're back.
Yeah, me too. And you notice a lot, half the people that come on this show are from elsewhere, but the University of Tennessee brought them here for some reason.
That's how I came here, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Where are you from originally?
I grew up in Virginia and then went to public schools in Virginia, had a great education, and then went off to Pennsylvania for college and met my husband there. And we both sort of took turns going to grad school and then, moving around for mostly his jobs at the time, lived in 6 different states. And then he got a tenure track job here at University of Tennessee. We moved here with a 6-week-old baby and didn't know a person in town. And we said, well, we'll check out Knoxville and see how it goes. And we fell in love with the place, and here we are, 21 years later.
Wow. Which part of Virginia did you grow up in?
Loudoun County, Virginia. It's about an hour out of D.C. Just straight up 81 and turn right at Winchester. And my high school, Loudoun Valley High School, is about 30 miles off of 81.
Gotcha. Was politics a part of the house growing up, being so close to D.C.?
Well, my dad has a long career in public service in the federal government. He was recruited out of University of Texas, along with a bunch of other Texans who came up to D.C. He worked for the Census Bureau and then Office of Management and Budget, and then later worked his way up and became director of the Census Bureau. So that was a civil service role, and he was the first ever director to be appointed from within the ranks of the Census Bureau, as opposed to someone who'd been a political donor or something else like that. So we were always exposed, my sister and me, to public service, and my mom was always involved in various, business endeavors, but also volunteering for local campaigns and more involved in the local politics side, which I love too. Local politics is so great because you can see the tangible progress. You can meet your constituents if you're the elected official or candidate, but you as someone who's representing people, I get to see the people I'm trying to serve every day. Mm-hmm. And that's not something you can say when you're representing at the state or national level. And I really appreciate that. And I think that's something that I especially like about being mayor.
Sounds like it's in your blood.
Yeah.
This kind of makes a lot of sense of the trajectory. So college was...
I went to Haverford College. Okay. It's a small Quaker liberal arts school outside of Philadelphia. Okay. About 1,200 students. And I was a history major and Spanish minor. Okay. So.
Yeah, was that when did public service become a thing? I mean, it was obviously around the house, but when did you decide that it was going to be a bigger part of your life?
Yeah, well, I think like a lot of people, I dabbled in several different types of jobs. I thought I wanted to go to law school, so I worked at the Justice Department for a couple years after college in a paralegal program, and loved that work. I got to do some really cool stuff. I was a undercover housing tester for the Civil Rights Department, and I helped sort of translate cables from the Cali cartel for the narcotic and dangerous drug section, and did some other really cool litigation. And I was like, I've topped out. This is the coolest thing lawyers get to do. So I decided being a lawyer was not for me. I was more interested in the policy side of things. So in between, getting married and following my husband to his law school and then his clerkship, I also tried some work in the nonprofit world and as a teacher. And then I applied to grad school. I got a full scholarship to Princeton, and that was hard to turn down. They said, we want to pay you to come study public policy. And I said, okay, that sounds fantastic. And one of the reasons that scholarship was so important to me and my classmates is rather than accruing debt for that 2 years of my master's degree, I was not incurring any debt, and I could then be more open to taking jobs that weren't so well paid. So right after that, I got great advice from people, from professors and people in the business community and people in the public service arena. One way to move forward in any career is to understand how the money works. So right after graduate school, I was a budget analyst for the Arizona State Legislature, where, again, my husband was working as a new professor at Arizona State. So our careers have been a little back and forth, taking turns and supporting each other. And he's the reason I'm in Knoxville. And now, we both have bloomed where we've been planted, and we love it here. And it's the greatest city in the world. I'm just honored to have this job and be working in this arena. It really is a dream job for me.
Excellent. You were involved in the previous administration too, somehow, right? Mm-hmm. Was that your first job within the city of Knoxville kind of?
It was,
world?
Yeah. I've worked for the federal government, for state governments, and then I was 10 years on the school board. But my first job working for the city of Knoxville was with Mayor Rohero. We went to Slovenia for a year where I taught school again. And then when we came back, it was Ben would ask me, so what are you going to do when you come back? And I said, I don't know. Maybe my hope is that maybe someone will recruit me and say, oh, India's back in town. I'd love her to come work with me. And so I did run into Mayor Rohero at an event, and she said she had an opening on her team and asked if I would apply. And I said, absolutely. And then I got the job and worked for her for 2.5 years, learned a lot about, city governance, but also about the role she did as mayor. And then I loved that job, and I thought she was doing a great job. And the only reason I left was she's term limited, and I wanted to put my hat in the ring to try to succeed her.
Did you feel as her term was coming to a close, there 8 years, is that right? Mm-hmm. Which I believe the previous mayor to her, Bill Haslam, he term limited out too. So it's two in a row. Yes.
He didn't quite finish his term because he ran for governor and won.
Really?
So there was an interim mayor briefly, Dan Brown, our first African-American mayor. He was appointed, he was vice mayor and served as mayor for, a year, 18 months in between when he left to be the governor before Mayor Rohero was elected.
Gotcha. Was there a point in you working with her that you said, when you said, I think I might be able to do this. I think I might be able to handle it.
Well, it was a great learning experience, and I like to give things a go. They say on your deathbed, you never regret what you did, but what you didn't do. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I did enjoy learning from her and seeing sort of a front row seat of that mayor's role, and I thought it was worth a shot for me to give it a go, and so far so good. I ran in a 6-way race. I was the only woman running. It was a very competitive race, very civil and collegial. All 6 great candidates, and then it was narrowed down to 2 after the primary. And I'm really proud of all the people who ran, because they all were doing it for the right reasons. And to this day, my colleague Eddie Manis, he's now serving in the state legislature, and we have a very collegial and constructive relationship, and he wants what's best for our community, and so do I. So that's the way I like politics to work, and Knoxville politics has a good track record of being productive, finding common ground, and even when you have disagreements, working through it in a civil manner.
What were your biggest, what you saw as the biggest things that needed to be addressed when you got into office? What were the first things that you wanted to tackle?
Yeah, I would say number one was housing. We have a serious crisis with affordable housing, and that was clear in 2019, and then it's only gotten worse since then. So that was a big issue. I pledged to, with the Justice Knox group, to find a dedicated source of funding and work with them. And one of the first things I did as mayor is work with them and have them part of a steering committee that we came up with an ordinance, and now we've dedicated $50 million of local funds towards affordable housing. And I also appreciate that group, Justice Knox, along with people from the construction trades, real estate, and bankers, were really key, said that we needed to focus on affordable housing, but also that affordable housing can have many meanings. Like, does that mean, so we can use those funds to buy land and then allocate that land towards more, construction or rehab projects that will be for affordable housing. It can be for the lowest of low income, but it can also be for people who are trying to build wealth and move from generations of being renters to buying their own homes. So there's a lot of flexibility, and I think that's very wise. The needs are huge and growing, and the local dollars complement monies that come in through private sector dollars. We can bridge financing gaps for people who want to build new housing or renovate existing housing. Also, federal dollars come into play. So housing, I'd say, was a big issue.
What was number 2 on the list that you that you started to think about? Because I know that we've had some proposals that have come up, and I think you just got out of a bunch of budget stuff recently where some things happened that you're proud of. But what else beyond housing did you see as kind of the penultimate thing to tackle?
I think another big issue was equity. Equity. I had 10 years on the school board, and I think we made great progress during that time addressing disparities in outcomes. But one thing I came to conclude was that our schools can only be as healthy and strong as the neighborhoods that they're serving. So one of the things I pledged to do as mayor, and I'm really proud of some of the progress we've made, is to invest in neighborhoods and invest in people. So that was another thing I promised to do as a candidate, and have been able to follow through on some of those promises. For example, sometimes transportation is a barrier for people to get to jobs, and so I made CAT free for kids up through high school.
Yep.
So anyone who needs to stay after school for tutoring or sports or drama can still get home if they live near a bus line, which most city kids do. Every single middle and high school in the city of Knoxville has a bus stop right outside it, and so now kids are able to ride for free. And that's one not so small thing, but it's a significant thing. And I also, the third thing, so we have affordable housing and equity, but the third huge priority during the campaign was about sustainability. And so that one program for bus ridership also helps meet our carbon reduction goals, where it establishes the pattern of using the bus as a viable option for people who don't want to drive or can't afford a car or are too young to have a driver's license. But those transit options, the more people use it, the more frequency we can get the buses to come. And buses, we talk about electric vehicles and all that. That's all good. But if you can get 30 people to ride a bus instead of 30 single vehicles, that's a really ideal solution. Plus, I'm really proud that our buses, 16 of our 75 or so buses are fully electric now.
I saw that.
Yeah, so
fully wrapped, and it says this bus is electric.
I know, they're quiet. There's no emissions, zero emissions. So those were sort of the priorities that I pledged to work on during the campaign. Obviously, a couple months into office, I was putting together my budget, putting my team together, and then the pandemic hit. So some of those priorities had to go on the back burner, or just be not on the back burner, but I had to make other priorities even higher, like addressing a global pandemic and trying to keep people safe in light of all of those challenges. And then, of course, we had the George Floyd murder and all of the effort to address systemic racism and to reimagine policing and make sure we're doing policing in constitutional ways. Right. And obviously that's been a big focus of all of our efforts in the last 2 years.
Well, hit a couple things there that I'd like to dig in deeper because I really want to talk about policing methods and how, instead of this, you've got one tool and it's a hammer kind of approach with policing, using, social workers and other folks who you don't always need someone to be restrained or, sometimes, there's other ways to go about things. And I know that you have worked a lot to reform that in our city police department. And, A, what have we done there? And B, what have you seen the effects be from there?
Well, right after the George Floyd murder, we wanted to find out what we were doing right and what we needed to change right away. And so we immediately adopted the 8 can't wait elements that the My Brother's Keeper, it's a Barack Obama, supported foundation. And the 8 can't wait was, several things that they said, we need to do these things right away. And luckily, KPD was already doing at least 6 of them that were explicitly in writing. And then so we immediately updated to add the other 2, which was banning chokeholds and also requiring police officers, what is the word when you're required to report somebody who's doing something wrong, your fellow officer? I can't remember.
Accountability or some kind of oversight.
Yeah, it's just
peer oversight.
Yeah, it's just saying, a duty to report, duty to report. Okay. When you see something going wrong, even if it's your colleague. So
right.
So those were things that I think KPD was doing, but it wasn't necessarily in writing. And so we updated that. Of course, we've had really high level of violence and homicides in 2020 was high, and unfortunately 2021 was higher. I don't think I think you look across communities, big, small, urban, rural, red, blue, across the country, and the level of violence has been really high throughout. And so I don't attribute that to KPD's action or inactions. I attribute that to the instability that the pandemic resulted in, a lot of, lost income, economic instability, mental health, crises. And then, for a while, kids were home from school, including my own daughter, who was a student at the time in Knox County. And then even the year following, Knox County allowed people to go back in person, but many families opted not to for, various different needs according to their risk levels and vulnerabilities and health status. So a lot of families had a lot of, if they were on the edge of being unstable, they went over the edge. Right. And so that... I think that contributed to domestic violence issues and non-domestic violence issues as well. We also have a huge number of guns in our community, and even people who are lawful gun owners sometimes don't lock their guns up, or they keep their gun in their car, and then the car gets robbed, and then those guns go into the hands of people who have nefarious intentions. And so the easy access to guns and unstable conditions of our world contributed to that. But so it has been really challenging, and but I do think some of the changes we've made, we've tried, the co-responder, having a social worker accompany police officers on mental health crises calls. That has never been tried in Knoxville. We piloted it for a few months, and then it worked so well, we incorporated it into the full budget, and now there's 4 teams where a police officer responds with a social worker or trained mental health professional. And that's been really helpful for everything from suicides to people having some kind of psychotic break. And sometimes they're armed. I know some people say, well, let's just let the social workers go solo, but it's some of those people, you never know if they're armed. I mean, we just saw what happened in New York City. It seemed like a very... it didn't seem like a super dangerous call, but when a police officer got killed responding to a domestic violence call, or some kind of thing where it didn't seem like it would be violent, but again, you never know. And so a lot of times when talking to mental health professionals from McNabb and other places, they say they want a police officer to be with them, and then once a situation is seen as, there's no immediate risk to life and limb, then they can go in and do their counseling. But meantime, we require de-escalation training for all our officers, and also every single officer goes through crisis intervention training. And there's a minimum amount. I can't remember the number of hours that every officer goes through, but then many officers, 40 or 50 of them at least, maybe more now, have gone through extra training where they spend several weeks. Again, I can't remember the exact details of how long, where they go on and get a special credential as a crisis intervention sort of specialist, so they can, they just have a little more awareness of mental health issues and how to approach people in a way that is calming and gets people the help they need.
Right. And it seems like knowing when to use which type of intervention is probably very helpful too, because I think that was one of the big things that you kept hearing with George Floyd, is that there's so much firearm training and so much, they're going into a situation expecting it to be dangerous, and there's other tools that can be used before force.
Right. You sort of want to be prepared for the worst scenarios, but not assume that you're going to need to use a weapon or be shot at. Yeah, being a police officer is a hard job.
It's a very hard job. Police officers and teachers, I always contend, are some of the most underappreciated and underpaid individuals that we have out there, and they're so important.
Absolutely.
Police officers are so important for our safety, and you're seeing that in places where the need is too great and the money's not there to have enough police officers, and then teachers as well. My kids with their teachers 6 hours a day, just as much as I am,
Right.
So that person is having as big of an influence on my child's life as I should.
Yeah.
That's a very important thing as well.
You're right, and you're exactly right that they're underpaid, and that's why I announced recently that I plan to put into my budget a major increase for city employees, particularly police officers.
Good.
Because we have 40 or 45 unfilled positions right now, just in police.
Really?
We have more like 150 across the city. So I'm hoping we did a compensation study, so we're not just guessing here. We're basing this on a consultant who studied peer markets. So we're going to do I'm going to propose, and council will be reviewing this as part of the overall budget, a significant increase of 6% to all police officers and all employees, and then depending on what the market shows, some officers and positions may get additional to that. Plus, everyone's going to make at least $15 an hour. We do have 100 or so people whose starting salary was below that level, and that's just not a living wage.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
Not even in Knoxville is it a living wage. So everyone in the city will earn $15 an hour, and hopefully if council approves this budget proposal, then we'll just have more competitive wages for everybody. And police officers have a very hard job, and they are underpaid, and they can leave and make more money in private sector jobs in security or other things. So we want to keep them. It costs also something like $40,000 every time we train a new police officer or firefighter. So this is just not good stewardship to spend that money to train them and then let them go before we have had the opportunity to benefit from their experience. So,
sure. Well, that's very different from a defund the police narrative, which is a lot of the response that you heard after the George Floyd stuff specifically, and I think it's the opposite of that. I think it's give people that we depend on the tools to do their job, and I think it's I'm a little bit surprised to hear that you're having trouble, filling roles within the police department. I guess everybody, the hiring market everywhere.
I think it's the labor market right now in general, but I'm hoping to fix that. And I do think that, I never supported the defund police movement, and I think it was
misguided.
Mm-hmm. We just, to the contrary, we need to, support our police officers. We're asking them to do more than ever. Mm-hmm. We need to train them to do all of these nuanced communication and de-escalation skills, and have the ability to intervene to protect lives if there's a lethal threat.
Sure.
So at the same time, I started for the first time ever the Office of Community Safety and promoted LaKenya Middlebrook to be the director of that entity, and that is a recognition that public, safety is something that KPD alone cannot provide. And safety is a community-wide issue. And there's a lot of studies and research that shows those communities' eyes on the street, the grandmothers, the other people who are just part of the community, and they know when something doesn't look right, or they know they can help enforce those social conventions. Like, no, you're not supposed to be playing music at high levels at midnight in the middle of the neighborhood. That's not okay. So those sort of informal ways to keep the peace is really important. And Ms. Middlebrook's job is also to really focus on our violence interruption efforts, where we know that particularly when there's an issue where someone is hurt or killed, sometimes there's a strong tendency towards retaliation, and then it's just a vicious cycle. So she is working to train up people with credibility in the community who are not at all associated with law enforcement to be available and ready to intervene. And whether you go to the hospital or you go to the families or just you're out in the community, 2 a.m., 2 p.m., everywhere in between, trying to interrupt those cases of violence before they get even worse.
Yep. So one of the other things that we touched on a few minutes ago with the buses and sustainability push and all that, I've wondered how much of a city mayor's job and purview, and even how much focus needs to be put on climate change, which is a global thing. And do you see it as, it's not something that we're necessarily going to be able to reverse or fix ourselves, but we just have to be a smaller part of the bigger push to do that? Because when you add a bunch of Knoxvilles together, then you start to really have can have some impact.
Absolutely.
So how do you approach that with how you weigh how much focus you can put on something that's more of a global push?
Right. Well, of all the issues we've talked about today, that's the one that's really existential for our whole planet. And so I think the people of Knoxville want this city to be at the forefront of combating climate change. And so I'm doing everything I can to think globally and act locally. And we're going to be launching a community solar project in the near future. We have our own emissions reductions goals that we're doing as a city, but also trying to do the same as a community. We have to act on that. I was able to convene my mayor's climate council, which investigated like waste, buildings, and transportation, the three big sectors, all through an equity lens, because sometimes you try to push forward on one area or the other, and you have to be aware of the disparate impact that can have on people of lower income levels. So just making sure that that's always part of the conversation is really important. So yeah, we have to act. The other thing is Knoxville is in a unique position, even though we're a small city. When you think about the global picture, we are the center of a lot of clean technology. Thanks to TVA, Oak Ridge National Lab, and UT, we are attracting people who are amazing minds who are going to make us have great batteries and be able to have dynamic charging along our roadways for electric vehicles, where you don't even have to stop and plug in. It's like happening on the road as you go.
I can't wait for that.
Yeah. And so to me, the answers to climate change are going to be in part changing, behaviors and mindsets and culture, but a big part is going to be innovation and how do we, decarbonize things as they before they're emitted into the air, or how do we use ocean water to power our home heat or whatever. Things that are not in my wheelhouse, but I've been able to visit some labs here at Cherokee Farms and also out at Oak Ridge, and the stuff that they're working on is amazing. And there are also there's a lot of effort, and we're supporting that too, to move from the labs to application. So we are going to be a small but mighty part of this climate change response, not just in how we act and reduce our own carbon footprint, but also how we support the great minds who are going to help us innovate out of this.
We have so many of them around here.
Mm-hmm.
We lived in Park Ridge for about 5 years before we moved to this house, and all the houses around us were a rotating cast of graduate students.
Yeah.
And I was just amazed at how many intelligent people come, cycle through university, ORNL.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, TVA is doing hydroelectric stuff and nuclear too, I guess, nearby. So I mean, there's lots of. We kind of, I hadn't thought about it like that, but we are kind of in this very fertile ground of, innovation in energy, kind of a good cross-section
Right.
Venn diagram of all that.
And we're also bringing through, some other entities. What is it called? It just started recently. It's bringing basically venture capital and people who can invest in these entities.
It's like a tech incubator.
Yeah,
or something
it's like a tech incubator.
Yeah.
Techstars,
Yeah.
And they're going to be located. Their offices where these, brilliant people who are taking their ideas into direct business applications are going to be downtown. But then they'll be able to use the super fast computers out at Oak Ridge and lab space at UT and get the money to go from research to applications that businesses and industry can use on a regular basis. So that's pretty exciting because when you start having that ecosystem that supports the scientists and the business applications, and my part of my job is to make Knoxville a community that people want to stay in. So you can work hard all day and then you can go out and have a beer afterwards, or go out and do your mountain bike riding, or raise your family here and know that we have great public schools. Those are part of the quality of life things that I want to attract and retain all the talented people here.
Yep. Ooh, you hit on something that I really want to talk about, and that's baseball.
Okay.
It's been on the...
Are you a fan? Are you a baseball fan?
Yes, and I mean, I grew up going to the KJ's games
okay.
at, Bill Meyer Stadium, and, my little girls are 6 years old. I want to take them and do that, and it's so exciting that it sounds like we're on a path to... have a multi-use stadiums, not just baseball. There's going to be other things too. What has that process been like, getting that going? Because I know that there's people on both sides of it who support it, people who don't support it, and it seems like it really is a big quality of life thing that can go a long way in our downtown.
Well, I think some of the detractors just aren't fully aware of all the good aspects of it. I was skeptical at first myself, and I always said that I would support it only if the benefits to the people of Knoxville outweighed the costs. And right now the costs are going to be $240,000 a year for 10 years. Just not that much in the big picture when you have a budget of $250 million per year. So that's the cost to the people of Knoxville. And then the benefits are we're bringing baseball back.
Sure. And
we're also going to have a place for a professional soccer team and other events that can happen throughout the year, and farmers markets, weddings, family reunions. And it also is like a public park, so people can, go there and just walk around, walk laps just the way they might do at a mall. But the other thing is that doesn't even count the indirect benefits, which is going to be a catalyst for revitalizing a part of town that has not seen much investment in years, include and be a gateway to connect to East Knoxville and Magnolia Avenue. And I just think it's going to be a great thing, and already has inspired more construction of housing and more investment in other businesses. So change is a little scary, but I think this is the kind of change that the benefits are going to be great to our community for years to come. So I'm excited. So the first pitch will come out in 2024. So
Really?
Your girls will still be young and maybe exploring, softball and other sports themselves.
Sure. And then the soccer team, that's a soccer club. I talked to Brandon Bruce. He was here on the podcast about a year ago and was telling me all about it. That sounds exciting too, because again, there's, we have rabid fan bases around here who travel to Atlanta to see the soccer games down there. It's going to be great to have, not just to have that sport here competing at that level, but also I feel like that was a big reason that that people were also finally able to to rally and support a stadium, a multi-use stadium, because when you think about the amount of money that it costs to spend and the amount of resources and the allocation it takes to get all that going, if you're only using it 38 days a year, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But if you're using it 3, 4, 5 times as much as that, then now we're talking.
Yeah.
So that seems like that kind of helped. It's just one of the small pieces that helped.
Yeah, One Knox Soccer Club. I'm excited about that. I'm a former soccer player, and fan myself, and I think that there's a lot of energy around that. And the stadium, it really is going to be multi-use, and that's a positive. And I'm also really proud of getting back to the issue that was number one during the campaign, was affordable housing. Just a short walk away from the stadium, we are in the process of redeveloping Austin Homes, First Creek at Austin, and it's going to go from 135 units to something like 430. And they're brand new buildings, and there's everything ranging from 1 bedrooms to 5 bedrooms, so it can be for people who live with 1 or 2 people to large families. It's walking distance to Green Magnet Elementary, to Vine Magnet, and also to jobs and transit and all the things that we want to connect people to opportunities. So there is, I'm so pleased that is happening at the same time, because, that kind of investment does also inspire people to build real expensive housing that will be overlooking home plate and that sort of thing. And that's not affordable, although more housing in general, more supply will help address the market shortages in general. But the fact that we have mixed income, that's very low income to moderate income, walking distance from this major investment, is a real plus.
It's excellent. I'm looking very, very forward to it. So what's been the toughest thing that maybe you didn't see coming when you set out? I'm sure that you knew there were going to be things that came up that were going to be hard to deal with. But what has been kind of the what's been your maybe an unexpected challenge that you've seen during your term?
Yeah, well, obviously the hardest thing has been the level of violence. In particular, last year we had so many young teenagers losing their life to gun violence, and it's really upsetting as a mayor, as a mom, as a human being, to see that loss of life. And so obviously I knew public safety was an important part of what the mayor's job is, and there's always going to be some level of violence, but having it be, unusually high, and then having it be so many young people who are victims has been really challenging. And so that's been a top priority to address, both through the law enforcement side of things as well as the more general community safety. And knock on wood, things are getting better, and I'm really glad for that.
It's excellent. Yes, it was very. As a parent, of course, you think about these things and how it could be my kid, and all those, and all those thoughts run through your head. But I wondered, what happened? Why is it that? Is it gang stuff? Do we know? Like, are kids getting into that kind of thing? And is there more of something that I don't even see going on out there? That's
yeah. Well, I think for these young people, it's stuff that used to be, a fist fight or maybe a knife fight, that now with easy access to guns, ends up in fatal gun shootings. And I think that's part of it. I think also just the instability caused by the pandemic has exacerbated things. There's some gang issues as well, but I think some of those other issues are even more of a factor. So,
Gotcha.
But we are making headway. Our police officers are, able to go after people with illegal guns and catch them before they commit crimes, that are fatal. And also we launched another thing called Crime Stoppers, where people can report tips anonymously and get rewards for that, and that helps too. That anonymity is important.
Sure.
And KPD has been able to arrest some people with who are suspected of a lot of very dangerous and threatening crimes, and now they're off the street. So, but yeah, the uptick, I think, is attributable to the, since we're not the only city who experienced it, I think
Right.
it's these global issues, not just things intrinsic to Knoxville.
Right. Yeah, I heard the governor talking about that. Right when we were in the throes of the pandemic, the rise in domestic violence and things like that. People, the shut-in nature of it, when we were all a little bit nervous to get out of the house. I mean, I can see how that. It was tough on us. I'm sure it was tough on everybody.
Well, and in particular, if you work in jobs where you can't stay home,
Right.
or your business might have not been operating at full
Sure.
speed, and so you lost income and you're stuck at home, it's really challenging time for a lot of families, and those who were struggling previously might have really had even bigger issues.
Right.
So
If you didn't have a lot of fault tolerance, all the trappings of the pandemic had a lot of different ways it could attack you, for sure.
yeah.
So do you have sort of like a group of city mayors in the United States? You get together with your counterparts in other cities, and you guys talk about
Absolutely,
what you're seeing?
yeah.
Okay.
I'm a member of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and I went to one gathering in January 2020, and then nothing for until
Zoom.
January of this year. I mean, we had
Okay.
some Zoom meetings
Yeah.
and that sort of thing, but January of 2022, we reconvened in D.C., and it was really nice to see people. And also I talk, for a time it was weekly, but now it's every other week with my fellow mayors from Nashville, Chattanooga, and Memphis. We speak on the phone every weekend or every other weekend, and talk about what's going on in our cities and share ideas, and also sometimes commiserate or just boost each other's
Sure.
spirits, because it has been a very intense time. And one thing, because so many people are under so much stress themselves, sometimes they lash out at their local elected officials and look, just, I don't take it personally. They're having their struggles and want some help, and sometimes want to cast blame. And so sometimes when I can help, I do, and other times, I try to connect them to resources where possible. But
Right.
but yeah, the U.S. Conference of Mayors is a great resource. National League of Cities, and also just my fellow mayors here in Tennessee have been really helpful. I also have called on Madeline Rogero and Bill Haslam, and they've reached out to me. Particularly during the early months of the pandemic, they said anything they could do to help, because they never. As they said, there was no playbook for navigating that
Sure.
that challenge, and so I sometimes tapped into their thoughts and wisdom and just support too.
So, talking about having, opposition, people lashing out, people getting riled up about things. It seems like there's tons of that can happen. I don't know about you, but I don't know how you I don't know how you do it and keep the smile going and not get not get insecure. Am I doing a good job? How do you shut out the noise and just continue to do your job?
Yeah, well, yeah, there have been some moments where it's been harder than others. I had somebody vandalize my home, and I've had
No.
protesters at our house, and also protests in other parts of the city, and during city council meetings, some very pointed comments during public forum. But two strategies I have for that. One is, after 10 years on the school board, I realized you got to have thick skin, and that it's not about me. It's like people are upset about circumstances, and I'm just elected officials and mayors are just a target of that. It's not personal. And the other thing is, and this was hard during certain points in the pandemic, is just getting out and about in the community, where you realize, yes, people are stressed and there's some issues, but someone will complain about, say, a pothole or something, and then someone else will be like, "Hey, you just repaved the street. It's awesome," and they don't bother to get in touch with you about that. But when you're out in the community, they'll say, "Hey, Mayor, thanks for making the buses free for my kids. It saved me some money. I appreciate that." Or, I'm really excited about my new home that was just built at First Creek at Austin, or some of the other many affordable housing apartment buildings that we've helped break ground on or cut the ribbon on. So getting out and about and speaking to people in a more broader swath of the community is really helpful. So I also like to just be outside and spend time with friends and my dog and exercise, and that sort of keeps me even keeled.
So, are you able to appreciate the quality of life things that we have going on here? Do you get to, or do you have to work all the time?
I have to play some of the time, or else I wouldn't be have much energy left to get stuff done at work. So yeah, I love our parks, and I spend a lot of time outside whenever possible. North, south, east, west. There's great parks all over the city. I'm a big fan and heavy user of our urban wilderness. I like to mountain bike and hike, and I love our quarries. They're great for swimming and hanging out in cold water places. So greenways. I love all that. I do get to use it.
Good.
That's important to me.
Yeah. Well, I would love to see you at Pachacacha on Thursday night if you get out and about. That'd be a fun thing
Maybe
to do.
I'll be able to stop by. That'd be fun. What time does it start?
7:20.
7:20. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll see if I can.
Yeah. What are some of your other favorite things to do in Knoxville other than the be outside kind of stuff?
Well, my husband and I love going to live music. And again, we couldn't for a long time, but now that's back, and we're excited about Big Ears, and we're excited about other music that's happening around. I love live theater, so starting to get back into that. I love going to all kinds of shows, and that those are the things that we do. I also just like movies, all these things that we took for granted for so long. It's nice to get back into it.
I have always been, and I'm in the film and television business, but I've always, for the last 10 or 15 years, said, I think I'd rather just sit at home and watch it on my big screen TV and watch it on Disney Plus or whatever, and have the movies come to me. But after being shut in for 2 years, going to the Riviera downtown and sitting and taking in a movie, it's great.
I also am a big sports fan. And,
you are?
We go to Vols football games. We're season ticket holders for basketball and football, and try to go to some Lady Vols games. And I caught the playoffs of the UT men's baseball team last year, and just love all of that too. I mean, University of Tennessee is a great school academically, and has so many great programs, and they've got some great sports to watch too, and really enjoy that part of Knoxville too.
So, what the University of Tennessee is such a force in this in Knoxville. How do you interface with the university and keep the balance of influence? I guess. I mean, I would think that it would be very easy for an entity like the University of Tennessee to just say, "Here's what we're going to do, and let's do it." We're enormous. How do you, how do you interface with them to make sure that
the tail doesn't wag the dog?
Yes,
that's a good question, and luckily I have a great relationship with Dondi Plowman, our chancellor, and she has a great team. We meet, I think, quarterly or maybe more often. Just her senior team and my senior team to discuss issues that we have in common, whether it's about public safety or housing. Those are the two most common ones, and those are great. We have a very collaborative relationship. She doesn't, we try to avoid surprising each other on things. And obviously, I've worked with Randy Boyd a little bit over in his role as head of UT Systems, but also he's got this side business as owner of a baseball team. So all in all, it's really good. We gave them a tour of some things in the city that some people that they're relatively new, like Log Haven Preserve down here in South Knoxville, and other parts of things south, because there's so many UT students who are living south of the river, and so we wanted to just share with them some of our plans and thoughts on how we can encourage that, but also make sure we don't have everybody who goes to UT drive by themselves in a car to campus every day, because there's no room for all those cars. So we had a great working relationship with them on revitalizing the streetscape on Cumberland Avenue, and I don't know if you've spent much time there recently, but it's a lot nicer.
It's beautiful.
And it's a lot safer. There used to be routine pedestrian, where cars were hitting pedestrians at all hours, and now that, knock on wood, has not happened nearly as much. And so it's safer, it's more aesthetically pleasing, and the city put in $25 million, and that has leveraged like $250 million in investment from the private sector. So that's a win.
That's great. I did mean to ask you about the Strip, because it seems like a success story.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like I said, it's safer, it's prettier, it encourages more people to walk and to patronize local businesses. So we worked really closely with UT and our Fort Sanders, your birthplace. They're obviously an important player in that area.
Sure.
So yeah, it's been a big success, and nothing, but that success means more growth, and sometimes that means growing pains. So that's a positive though too.
So, what other ideas do you have for your career? Because I mean, the mayor can only serve for 8 years. So
I'm just 2 years into my first term, and so that is my. I'm living the dream right now. I am planning on running for re-election. I'll be up for re-election in 23, and I feel like the best way to earn re-election is to do a good job as mayor, and that's what I'm working hard every day to do. And I do love the work. There's never a dull moment, and we are, I think, this year able to really hit our stride. The pandemic is not over, but it's hopefully moving to endemic stages, which is really a relief. And many of the things that we have initiated in years 1 and 2 are now starting to yield some tangible results, whether it's the compensation study where I can raise pay for city employees who provide these essential services that people, as we are growing, more people are moving to Knoxville or they're coming back to Knoxville. They need excellent services for public safety, for medical things. Our firefighters put out fires, but they also, I'd say 2/3 of their calls are medical in nature, when people are having heart attacks or overdoses or all those things. So when we spend $40,000 investing in our police and fire and then they leave, that's not good. So some of these things that we've been put into place in year 1 are now starting to bear fruit, and really thrilled about our investment at the old St. Mary's complex. We're going to be opening that hopefully later this year in August or September, and that's a $60 million investment in that part of town that otherwise would have been a vacated, blighted property. So instead of an empty hospital, it's going to be our new police and fire headquarters and pension and city courts. And it's a stone's throw from Fulton High School. And I know that the school has already started a criminal justice program.
Excellent.
And emergency responder, to introduce students to those careers. And they can walk over and have job shadowing experiences with police and fire, but also LMU has a nursing school there, and they're opening up a dental school too. So that's really close to Fulton, but it's also not an easy transportation ride for kids at Central and West and Austin East, and I think that's going to be a real positive.
It's excellent.
Yeah.
Kristen, did we miss anything?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right.
Mayor.
Mayor.
Great boss.
I paid her to say that. Yeah.
Well, I am very grateful that you came over, and I'm absolutely delighted and honored to meet you. Thank you for doing this.
Pleased to meet you too, and thanks for having me on the show.
Of course. See you soon.
Okay.